She knew the rules. She upheld the rules. But when a power-hungry officer stopped her and refused to recognize who she was, the situation turned dangerous until fate stepped in. The road stretched empty under the night sky, a lonely highway lit only by occasional streetlights. A sleek black car moved steadily in the right lane, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Elena Hayes had been driving for nearly an hour, her thoughts still focused on the confidential meeting she had just left. As the newly appointed head of a federal investigative unit, she was used to long nights and endless responsibilities. But what she wasn't used to, what caught her completely off guard, was the sudden flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Her fingers instinctively tightened around the steering wheel. A quick glance at the speedometer confirmed she was driving exactly at the limit. No speeding, no reckless maneuvers. No reason to be pulled over. Yet, the police cruiser remained behind her. Exhaling slowly, Elena flicked on her turn signal and guided her car to the shoulder. She had spent years working alongside law enforcement. She knew procedures. She understood how things were supposed to work. But as the patrol car rolled to a stop, a strange feeling settled in her gut. Something was off. Why was the officer taking so long to approach? Adjusting her rearview mirror, she tried to get a look at him. The driver's side door of the cruiser finally swung open. The man stepping out wasn't familiar. Not that she expected to recognize every officer in the state, but there was something about his stance, the way he carried himself. His left hand rested near his gun, his right gripping a flashlight as he approached. Elena pressed the button to lower her window, keeping both hands where he could see them. "Good evening, officer," she said, keeping her voice polite and professional. The officer's flashlight swept over her face. Too slow, too deliberate. "License and registration," he said flatly. No greeting, no explanation, just a demand. Elena kept her expression neutral. This was not normal. "May I ask why I'm being stopped?" she inquired evenly. The officer chewed his gum, eyes locked on her. A few seconds passed before he repeated himself. "License. Registration." She didn't move right away. Years of training told her something wasn't right. This wasn't a simple traffic stop, and she needed to manage it carefully. "I'm reaching for my purse," she said, making sure her tone remained measured. No response. She slowly retrieved her wallet, pulling out both her driver's license and her federal credentials. The officer glanced at them but didn't take them. "Federal agent, huh?" he muttered. She nodded. "That's correct." A long silence stretched between them. Then came the words that shifted everything. "Step out of the vehicle." It wasn't a request. Elena blinked. "Excuse me." The officer took half a step back, hand still near his weapon. "Out. Now." The air around them grew heavy. She had done everything by the book. She had identified herself. She had followed protocol. Yet this officer, whoever he was, saw her as a problem, not a citizen complying with the law. Elena had seen situations like this before. She had studied the cases. She had watched the body cam footage. She wasn't about to become another statistic. Her heart remained steady, but her mind was already calculating. She knew how fast these moments could spiral. She also knew how to survive. Then, just as she was weighing her next move, the officer's patience snapped. He reached for her door handle. That's when she realized this wasn't just about pulling her over. This was something much worse. But Elena wasn't the kind of woman who let fear take control. The sharp click of the handle sent a jolt through her, not of panic, but of clarity. Before he could yank the door open, she locked it from the inside. "Officer, step back," she instructed, her tone calm but firm. "You're not following proper procedure." The officer's jaw tensed. His grip on the handle tightened. "I told you to get out." Now, she could hear it. That edge in his voice. The power trip. Elena had dealt with men like this before. Men who believed authority meant absolute control. Men who pushed limits just to see how much they could get away with. But this wasn't a man in a corporate office. This was a cop with a badge, a gun, and an ego that made him dangerous. She refused to break eye contact. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice unwavering. For the first time, the officer hesitated. His lips parted slightly, as though scrambling for an answer. But instead of responding, he did something worse. He stepped closer, the flashlight in his left hand aimed straight at her face, blinding her to everything except his silhouette. "I don't have to explain myself to you," he said. Elena didn't blink. "Actually, you do." The muscles in his jaw twitched. She could tell he was irritated, frustrated that she wasn't reacting the way he wanted. "Lady, I don't care who you work for," he sneered. Elena's pulse stayed steady, but she knew the reality of what was happening. This wasn't just an abuse of power. This was an attempt to intimidate. And fear, that wasn't something she allowed herself to feel. "Then let's call your supervisor and see if he cares," she said coolly. That pushed him over the edge. The flashlight dropped. His free hand slammed against the roof of her car. The sound cracked through the night air like a gunshot. "I said get out," he growled. For the first time, Elena glanced at his nameplate. J. Morgan. She made a note of it. She wanted to reach for her phone, but any sudden movement could be twisted into an excuse. So she stayed still, her eyes locking onto his. "You're making a mistake," she told him. Morgan let out a humorless chuckle. "No, the mistake was thinking you could pull rank on me." And that's when she saw it. The shift in his stance. The twitch of his right hand near his belt. He was considering it. The air between them thickened. Then a second vehicle pulled up. Red and blue lights flashed again as another police unit came to a stop behind Morgan's cruiser. For a moment, relief flickered in her chest. Another officer meant a witness. It meant accountability. But then she saw who stepped out. Another officer. Tall, muscular, no visible nameplate under the glare of the lights. Morgan didn't even glance back. And that told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't backup. This was reinforcement. Elena's pulse remained steady, but her mind raced through every possible outcome. She had spent years preparing for high-stakes situations, but this wasn't a courtroom, a crime scene, or an interrogation room. This was the middle of a dark highway, and the rules weren't being followed. The second officer stepped closer, his expression unreadable under the flashing lights. His presence didn't bring relief. It confirmed what she already suspected. This wasn't about the law. It was about control. Elena inhaled slowly, keeping her hands visible. She had two choices: comply and risk whatever these men had planned, or assert her authority and escalate the situation. But then an idea sparked. "If either of you put your hands on me without cause, it's a federal offense," she said, voice calm but cutting. "And this conversation, it's being recorded." Morgan stiffened. His eyes darted to her dashboard camera, the one he had likely ignored until now. She saw the hesitation flicker across his face, a crack in his confidence. The second officer shifted uncomfortably. Elena seized the moment. "So what's it going to be, Officer Morgan? Are you really willing to throw your career away for this?" Seconds stretched like hours. Then, without a word, Morgan stepped back. Elena didn't move, waiting, watching. Finally, the second officer muttered something under his breath, then turned back toward his cruiser. Morgan lingered a beat longer, then spat onto the pavement and walked away. The moment their cars pulled off, Elena let out a slow breath. She had won, but this wasn't over. Names, badges, faces. She would remember them all, because the next time they met, it wouldn't be on a dark highway. It would be in a courtroom.